My name's Fionnuala Fagan and I created the performance piece Dreaming Protected Me.
And dreaming protected me through some sort of different vision, not always grounded here on earth.
The project really began about 2 years ago when I went to Bosnia in order to work with a group of Bosnian artists and a group of Northern Irish artists on a series of workshops that took place over the course of a week. This was with not only Prime Cut Productions but East West Centre in Bosnia. Throughout the course of that week, we discussed a lot of things, mainly to do with the situations that we had experienced in our respective countries as a result of conflict and the other conflicts and atrocities that were happening in the world or that have happened in the world. It was an extremely intensive week of workshops and I came home with a new understanding of the place that I had grown up in, and really it was the beginning of me starting to understand that what we experienced in Northern Ireland as a result of the conflict was not normal. It took me some time to bring all of those ideas and realisations together in my mind. I decided after about 4 months that I would be interested in working on a project that used the narratives from Bosnia and from Northern Ireland and juxtaposed those stories together. I wanted to look at how the stories could cross cultural boundaries.
But there was a number of the songs where if you were to listen to them, it was not immediately obvious as to whether it was a Bosnian one or an Irish one. So I found that interesting too. That was one of the things that emphasised the link between the two conflicts and the similarities.
When you grow up in a place like this, or maybe a place like Bosnia, you need to know coded things to detect the other side by their names or where they went to school or where they live and subjects to avoid in a place like this, in a place like this, in a place like this.
The methodology which I use for my work is based on a style of theatre called verbatim theatre. In verbatim theatre, the scriptwriter uses interview material and edits together the script from that, from different people's stories. And for me, when I'm writing songs, I do the same thing. And during that process then, I think about who I want to interview because, in Dreaming Protected Me, I interviewed people that I had already met and people that really intrigued me. And I felt that those people had something really inspiring to say. So for this particular project, I was interested in that because I felt if we were talking about war and using stories from war, I needed there to be some hope in the performance piece that would be eventually realised. And I knew that those people would give me that because of their characters. So that's a very big part of the initial stages of the project. Who am I interviewing and why am I interviewing them?
But if I take my accordion and play, life is perfect. Ooh, if I take my accordion and play, oh, it gives me strength.
In terms of actually choosing the narratives which I used, I feel that's where my voice comes in as an artist because obviously there were lots of stories that came out of all of those interviews and I picked 10 to retell. And I picked those because they resonated very strongly with me, and I felt that because they resonated with me and because I could relate to the stories, that therefore an audience would also be able to relate to them, which is very important to me in the work that I do, because I'm using people's memories. I also want the performance pieces to trigger other people's memories.
The childhood memories I have are more from stories that I was told. They're not my own. They're not my own. But I remember when I was 7, just sitting under a tree across the road from where we used to live, brushing my hair. It was fairer than it is now, little bits of blonde through it, such a light quality to it.
So when I am writing the music for a story, I think quite carefully about the person that I interviewed and the mood and the manner in which they told me their story, and really how I perceived them feeling about the story. And I try to use the music to support that. I really try to think about that person and an interpretation or a musical interpretation of their story that they would be happy with.
Fionnuala, in terms of your relationship with who you interviewed, I mean, that's very, I imagine, a very intense experience, this communication. And I know that the people that you interviewed found it extremely difficult to revisit a past that's difficult to revisit. So it's a huge responsibility as an artist then to take somebody's life and life experience and translate it into your modus operandi, your art. How much responsibility did you feel after you made the work in relating it back to did you have this moment of sending this email off and going, how important was it, their response to the work that you've made from their words?
Well, it's extremely important. I think there's one specific person who the mother song that I was really nervous how he would respond, and but thankfully he was, I mean, he said it was very difficult to listen to these songs, and but I wish I had, but he'd written to me, he wrote a lovely email to me saying that he felt I had captured his words and the feeling. That was one of the things he said. I don't think I can ever retell a narrative authentically, because I am using my own ideas. I am creating music which the person had nothing to do with, but they're always in my mind.
And he would say to me, well, what should we do? And at a certain point I told him, I have a great thing for you. Let's play some folk music, he said, what? And I said, come and just these 3 chords, let us play the very last one. So we played Whoop-a, and he would laugh, he would say, I would never think that folk music would cure me this way. Whoop-a, and he said, this is great, oh this is wow, oh this is great. And he would laugh as we would play. It's an hysteric kind of way of doing.
So I came to the point in the rehearsal process, I was working alongside Claire and Patrick. I was wondering how to piece all of this together. I had a series of 12 interview excerpts which I had used or created sound design for, which is part of the double disc album. But somehow, well, some of the people that I was working with suggested that this might make it very heavy with narratives and maybe not enough intent or purpose. So I worked with Hannah, who's a dramaturg from Tinderbox Theatre Company. She was able to bring me back full circle to my first visit to Bosnia and my experience of realising that I was really affected by the place that I grew up in. She advised me that would be a possible through line for the show. So I went away and I wrote a poem which described different experiences that I'd had throughout my life. And these weren't the worst things that I had experienced in terms of the troubles, but they were things that I knew that other people would be able to relate to. And to me, they more described the experience of our society.
I was born in 1981, the year of the hunger strikes. The news reports poured into my living room before I myself could talk or walk away from the horrific words which filled my mind. But protected by the fact that innocence is bliss, thankfully, I have been unaffected by this.
So through using that narrative, I was attempting to provoke other people into thinking about their own position within the conflict here or within the society that they had come from themselves. For example, there was a woman from Serbia there, and she said at the discussion point that she had been walking around for 20 years saying that she was largely unaffected by the war that happened in the former Yugoslavia, and that she realised watching the performance that that was not true.
Yeah, there was a number of the songs that I felt which I connected with. For example, my father died when I was a year old, and it was just myself and my mother since then. And the song about the greatest art of all, although it was in a different context, it was still the same, similar theme in that no matter what tragedies happened to you, it was the mother of the family who was keeping it all together and keeping you motivated to try and be the best that you could be.
She kept our home to be a home that was the greatest art of all. Defending life despite the lack of everything. In quiet resistance to the fresh blood on the road. She kept our home to be a home, that's what my mother did. That was the greatest art of all.
It's interesting to see how the work relates to people as individuals, and how the hearing of other people's experiences can make you reflect on your own.
When it came to performing these songs at the show, I was aware that, yes, it's not my voice, it's Irma's voice, but in some ways because of just knowing a bit more about her, thinking of what she had to overcome.
My name is Irma Saje, and I was 12 when the war started. I mean, there are so many things to tell. I was aware of life and its hardness very early, growing up confronted with serious problems, childhood stuff.
I just had a real connection, and it felt as if I was part of her persona in the performance. I kind of felt as if I had a little bit of a part in her story. know it sounds strange, but I had that connection. I just knew that when it came to delivering it, I had to really respect that it was her story, but I also felt as if my emotions and my memories of growing up here in Belfast had kind of become entangled a little bit with hers.
It's the most important part of my life, which I wish it didn't happen, but for me, it's still only a part of my life. It's not the only thing that happened.
I suppose with the material that we were dealing with, as a musician, I felt a bit more of a responsibility as how I was supposed to approach it, perform it, deliver it.
We were actually talking about this in terms of even the performance before coming on stage this evening. How do you communicate with the audience? You know, or how do we communicate with each other? Do we, smile but I was saying no, because this is we're communicating something that's not us. We're not the characters. The characters are the people that I've interviewed, and so the music, obviously the music comes from me as well, but it's my interpretation of them and how they told me their story and how I received their story, I guess.
When we tried to develop what the visual aesthetic of the piece was, and I was very keen to do something that included projection onto body, as well as maybe some kind of psych projection as well. And ultimately we did a combination of both. Neither Fionnuala and I wanted to be literal with the visuals, other than the opening images, contextualising the performance within the conflict both here in Bosnia, and then using text, extracts from the transcripts themselves on the body. We wanted just to acknowledge where the material has come from, and it was just a very organic way of working, whereby we would just see what visuals suited the tone, the emotion of the song, and much of the visuals were very abstracted and not literal in any way. Much of the feedback has been about how the visuals were quite subtle. Some people didn't even see the images at times, they weren't even aware of them, but ultimately the images always work to support the narrative and the music and the songs.
Sarajevo has this spirit, we didn't stop, we didn't stop.
Being part of this project has kind of shed a light on my own perspectives of how I grew up and how I've been shaped by the place that I live. I can't escape that. And I suppose that gave me an overall sense of I'm really a part of this, and when it came to the delivery on stage, I'm sure it translated. I was in there, I was in that song, I was in that story.
Working on the stories has changed my perspective in that it has expanded it to really emphasise that although these conflicts happen on a large scale, they're all made up of a large number of individual personal stories. And it has also made me think about things that might have happened to me during the Troubles here.
Through the course of working on Dreaming Protected Me, I was able to use my own story in a way that I hadn't done before. And for that reason, it has been a journey of self-discovery. And through interviewing other people about their experiences, I have discovered a lot of things about myself and my own experience.
If you want to know what the person beside you is feeling, rather than to be corrective of them and tell them the right way of things, you need to listen so hard that you actually take their truth in. Not as a version of your overarching truth, your real truth, but as something different from your truth. You know, if you really want to know, or even if you think it's important, you have to make a clearance. You have to make a wee space in all of what you know and all of what you hold to be true. You need to make a clearance in which their truth as a new thing can take a small root and can grow, and you can watch it as it grows before you jump in and say, no, I'll tell you. You see, in our lifetime, in my lifetime, if you watched political debates on the television or listened to them on the radio, the definition of listening was just about holding your tongue before you dived in and put somebody right. That was listening. Just about holding your tongue. But that's no use, you know. That's no use. We'll just slither past each other, encased in our own sense of identity. But if there is to be reconciliation, if that process is to move on, I think we need to believe in that version of listening, that you make a small clearance for something that you don't already know to take root. And then, like I was talking about earlier, then you grow around that. And to grow around that, you need to grow a little bit bigger.